Welcome to the Legally Speaking podcast. You are now listening to season 7 of the show. I'm your host, Rob Hanna. This week, I'm delighted to be joined by Ben Paul. Ben is the CEO of the BD Ladder, a business development and marketing consultancy. Before founding the BD Ladder, Ben was the business development and marketing director at Denton Kensington Swan in New Zealand. He was the director of the Business of Trust, where he delivered client training programs, in addition to publishing articles for Law Talk, NZ Business Magazine, NZ Entrepreneur, the Microsoft NZ SME blog, and many more. Ben held the position of Business Development Manager at Minter Ellison Rudd Watts, PwC in London, and Grant Thornton. With over 20 years of experience in sales and marketing, Ben champions that all professionals can grow their business with the help of practical and actionable advice. So, a very warm welcome, Ben.
Morning, Rob, and thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Before we dive into all your amazing projects, experiences to date, we do have a customary icebreaker question here on the Legally Speaking podcast, which is, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being very real, what would you rate the hit TV series Suits in terms of its reality of the law, if you've seen it?
I have tragically seen it all from start to finish, every single series. Probably about 3.5 to 4.
And with that, with the way it was delivered, it pretty much tells the story. We should move swiftly on and talk more about you. So to begin with, Ben, would you mind telling our listeners a bit more about your sort of background and career journey?
Yeah, so while I'm based over here in Auckland, New Zealand, my accent might still exist, although for those in London it will be less strong than it is, but over here they see it as ridiculously strong. Yes, I was starting my career over in England, originally in B2B sales, so selling IT training, e-learning, all that fun stuff, telesales, learning my skills that way before I joined Grant Thornton, which was a really cool part of my career. They wanted someone to come in and sort of talk to their partners and their senior managers and coach them and give them the skills of how to, actually interact and make those sales calls in a very competitive market. And while they had some really highly skilled operatives in the BD and marketing team that could do that, one of the struggles was people who were trying to coach them hadn't actually done it themselves, hadn't got the war stories, hadn't, all importantly, had the failed sales calls that everyone wants to hear about and where you messed up so they can learn from them. So they hired me and I went into that and started building my career in professional services. Grade A in London, in a nice time of life. A job advert came up to go and set up the BD function here in Auckland for Grant Thornton. So I thought, hey, why not? Never been to New Zealand, but give it a go. So over I came. Really good fun over here. Met my now wife, who is perfect in every way, except that she put a dagger through my heart and said she hated London. So we went back for a couple of years, worked for PwC London, primarily in the FTSE 100 audit and assurance division, working on big pitches and big proposals there, and get my wife to love London on the same side, and got married, had our child, and then decided that we really wanted to settle in New Zealand. Came back, worked for an engineering organisation, then started my career in law, which is what we'll get into today with Minter Ellison, and that was really exciting and slightly different, having done the holy trinity of professional services firms, but a really good growth story here in New Zealand of a firm that came out from the mid-tier and then became one of the top-tier firms, certainly in our country. And then a little bit of consulting, got back in, headhunted into head up, as it was Kensington Swan, and oversaw it rebrand and become Denton's Kensington Swan and all that fun stuff. And then decided January 2020 I didn't want to work for a big global. I wanted to do my own thing and set up my own business. So the BD Ladder was formed, which was great. Tells you I'm not a fortune teller. Didn't know the lockdown was coming, but really wanted to provide practical BD and marketing advice and be a consultant and try and lead active change. So that's why I started the firm. That's all the background in there, and it's been good fun that's taken us to where we are now.
Yeah, and there's some really great learns in that as well. Particularly, you talked about when you're in the roles in the professional services firms, you work for 2 global accountancy or, organizations, fantastic. But, learning from people who have the experience, I think is really important because you never really lose, you learn, and you take that, those practical examples. Like you say, that winning is great, but it doesn't always teach you many things. So I love that you kind of have that ethos around learning from the States, and people have actually got that tangible experience. I'm an investor in a company called Hector, which is a recruitment tech business, which only has people who have been on the tools you can give them now, because things change so quickly. how business development was done 20 years to today is just changed. But let's start from your sort of, merging into time from law, because you touched on it there. You were sort of business development marketing director at Kensington Swan, who, were part of the team overseeing the firm's successful merger with law firm Denton. So what were your responsibilities in actually managing the rebranding of the firm to Denton's Kensington Swan?
It's cool because it's quite a slick operation. I think the main part here is actually, they reach out to firms and you get stuck in the due diligence phase. So is it right for our firm? Should we join this big global beast? What does it mean? How does it work? And then it's learning to work in that environment where only the management team and a select handful of partners of the board know. So you actually know something that other partners in the firm don't know while you're going through that due diligence phase. The rest of your team don't know that you're working on it. And just assessing it and seeing what it means. And look, it's a really good model in terms of firms who join it get to keep their own ownership and get to join something a little bit bigger. And for us here in New Zealand, that makes only the second truly global firm here. So it's a very unique distinguisher for the New Zealand market. And there's various factors as to why that is, as opposed to Australia just over the ditch where there's every global law firm you can possibly think of and name. So it's a real good advantage to them, and then you go through to it and you work with the global team about how you bring that to the local market, how you announce it. And look, the most important part is when we announced it before we even joined. That's the hugest hit.
Yeah.
And within a week, all the partners are out their office, all the senior associates are out their office, and the meetings just go, because there's massive interest in what this means and clients wanting to understand it. And it's just getting those comms right. Some people know that suddenly they're not going to have to pay ridiculous, exorbitant fees. That hasn't changed. They're still paying the same fees, but they've got access to a whole world of better practice. I sound like I'm selling them even though I've left the firm now, but that's the model, and that's what you bring that through. And then obviously consistency in making everything purple.
Yeah, exactly. I think again, really good sort of examples there of how to follow a proven roadmap that's successful, and blue ocean opportunity. Like you said, you go over to Australia, it's very red ocean. It's full of law firms, but actually if you can get in early and use that strategy and really take precedent in New Zealand, why not? So from there though, you then became, as you mentioned, sort of CEO and managing director of your own gig, the BD ladder. For those who may not be familiar, what is the BD ladder?
How dare people not be familiar with the company that I formed in my own house, and it's a small startup. Look, we're very much in that practical doing business development consultancy, and we're a marketing agency as well. Our main thing is to work with people to understand what they're trying to achieve and then build a plan for them. So true consultancy, as I like to call it, but really less cookie cutters. Yes, we have processes and steps, but they're not the same from one client to another, or even one person we're coaching to another. It's really about understanding what will be successful for them, building that plan and supporting them through it, and playing to our strengths and working through that. So we work predominantly in Asia Pac, but we're starting to see increased interest in other regions. And obviously with my accent, going back to London, UK is obviously appealing to us as well. So that's kind of the model is working through it. And I've brought on a couple of contractors, and we have a full-time employee here as well.
Wow, so that's great. Considering born through a pandemic and to where you are now. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but you founded the BD ladder firmly believing that all B2B service providers should be able to access experienced BD sales and marketing advice to help them grow their business. So can you talk us through the stages of building the BD ladder?
Yeah, sure. I wrote a business plan and took it to someone over here who I trust very well. And we were kind of looking at potentially taking it to one of the big four agencies and bringing it into their fold. She had contacts into that area. But as I was writing it, I kind of had that feeling in my stomach that this was a really good idea. And then I got the feedback, and bless Karen, she asked me the question that I kind of needed asking, but wouldn't ask it of myself, which was, this is really good. Why do you want to give it to someone else? Wouldn't you do this yourself? And at that point, I kind of knew. But you've just left the golden handcuffs. You've now got to go out and find your own clients and build your own business from the ground up. So that was probably the hesitancy. But then again, once you have that passion, that drive, and that burn, it sees you through. No matter what the market conditions are, that's the moment you go, I want to do this, and you find a way to do it.
Yeah, I love that, and I talk a lot about that when I'm delivering talks about the passion, entrepreneurship. If it's meant to be, it's up to me. And a lot of people who run their own business, when they're passionate enough, will take that responsibility, and whatever it takes, we'll get through it. And it's clear that you're super passionate about what you're doing as well. But for people, again, lawyers, BD is a huge part for people, particularly maybe who have aspirations to become partners, set up their own firms. There's no way you're going to do it without BD. But what is the difference in very simple terms between business development and marketing?
Yeah, and does it matter?
Yeah.
And the answer is it actually does, right? But, realistically, marketing sets the platform. It's the foundation. It's what gets you top of mind, builds your brand presence, gives people an awareness that you exist. BD is anything that's more focused on either developing a new service or product that will help you win work or actually getting face to face. So probably sales. And a lot of terms in lawyers' terms, they don't like the term sales. They use BD when they mean sales. But the two are interchangeable. When you're talking to clients, when you're out in front of people, when you're even doing an online call or messaging that's actually building rapport, anything that's going to turn that relationship, develop that relationship stronger and turn it into billable work. That's the true art of BD, and that's the thing that most people need help with because they're scared of it.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, even an example right here, right now is myself and Ben. We are collaboratively business developing because, we're talking to Ben, who's got a great audience over in New Zealand. It's a market that us as a show are looking to try and get more distribution, new listeners. Ben obviously has got clients all over and particularly, interested in the London market. So, there's a real synergy through collaborating and actually just providing thought leadership and content where actually business development and sales doesn't have to be that dirty word. It can just be organic and actually lead to benefit of both your business. So let's talk about some of the misconceptions. I'm super passionate about this as someone who's always been around recruitment, sales, BD. It's been the lifeblood of how I've been able to stay afloat really over the years and go on to do various different things. But what are some of the misconceptions or myths surrounding business development and marketing?
I think some of the myths are that you actually have to sell something, and that sounds counterintuitive. And you referenced Suits at the start of this show, the idea of Harvey, the closer.
Yeah.
Makes for great TV, but realistically, people don't want to be closed. And if you want to build a relationship with someone, they don't want to be closed, because that's where you pin someone into a conversation corner and got them to sign something that maybe they don't really want to agree to. That's the definition of it when you break it down. What you want to do in the world of services is build a long-term relationship with someone. The books like 𝐤𝐡𝐨 and all those people who talk about that trusted advisor, fantastic. But to do that, you've got to put the other person first. You've got to understand what's important to them. You've got to build rapport. You've got to try and help them with whatever they're trying to achieve, whether it's you can help them with a legal service, whether you can help them with BD and marketing. So in my world, I get lots of calls from my clients and my contacts, and they'll ask me, do I know someone? Can I help them with this? Who in my network should they talk to? Have I heard of this person? Do I know it? None of this is revenue generating, but the fact that these calls come starts to tell you you've got a good relationship and helps you build that network, mutual collaboration, like you mentioned earlier, and it helps driving it forward. So in a way, it's about focusing on the relationship. And even though you are ultimately trying to win sales, it's not actually doing what people traditionally perceive as sales.
Yeah, it's so true. And I always say the art of good selling is not knowing you're being sold to. And, again, you make a really good reference to what my mentors told me very early on to my career. What's everyone's favorite radio station, WIFM? What's in it for me? And leading with value and thinking about, and again, someone said to me, contacts are good, but the relationships are the ones that pay. And actually, I've worked with, junior lawyers who I've had no sort of, necessarily initial, deal opportunity, but then, through keeping in touch, forming a relationship, actually they get more senior, maybe help them find a new role. And that customer lifetime value from when they were sort of, started their career to mid-career has actually exponentially gone up 10x if we place them in a role and have added value throughout. So it's a really important point that you share across law firms or lawyers listening to this. Just think, well, how can everyone has value to give to somebody and to form a relationship, and everything just starts with a conversation. So let's dive into lawyers then. How much time do lawyers need to allocate to business development activities? And what should they do to make best use of this time?
Yeah, so we've had some fun with this. So we've created a BD plan in 18 minutes or 3 billable increments, deliberately that. And it's possibly more 15 minutes, but let's have some fun. The reality is If you take out the actual time you're doing the meetings, the main focus is on getting those meetings and the activity around it. A simple discipline in 15 minutes a day, once you've built your list of who you know you need to talk to, and that bit takes a little bit longer and you classified them, then you can reach out to them. If they're good contacts, if they're clients, it doesn't take long. A simple message of, hey, we haven't spoken in a while, I want to catch up, find out where your business is going, uncover a little bit more. How about we grab a coffee or a beer? And it differs from region to region what the etiquette is on that kind of stuff. Great, right? Easy enough to do. And the same with referrers. And in the network of professional services, we've talked about, Big Fours and engineers. Well, actually for lawyers, they're good sources of referral networking. They'll want to meet you as much as you want to meet them. It should be relatively easy in that 15 minutes in a day to book 1 or 2 meetings. If you do that 2 or 3 times a week, suddenly your diary is full. And it's a simple discipline, right? And if you're trying to get back in touch with people, there's loads of different tactics in that as well. If you know what's important to someone, you can pull that report from McKinsey and send it to them and say, hey, look, this is really important. You'll find this interesting. Here's page 4. They'll say, that's cool. Why don't we have a chat about it? It will produce the next meeting. Ways to get back in touch with your client, even when you're not working on a matter. So having those touch points are really, really important, but it's all around discipline. A little bit like trying to get fit and going to the gym.
Yeah. It's habits, isn't it? And I always talk about when you're trying to follow up with relationships, new news. Nobody likes to be chased on something. And particularly, have you seen this? Hey, just thought that doesn't add any value. Where, like you say, if you have that McKinsey report, some new news, something that's going to add to that conversation that you can build on, that touch point is going to be, okay, this is a thought leader. This is the person that actually really wants to help me rather than just, hey, me. So I love that. It's a really good example. And lawyers, there's so much information out there everywhere that it makes it so easy now. And there's so much information on people's social media handles. There's so many ways you can find sensible touch points to get greater responses as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely, right? I mean, Google's your friend. You can set up search things. You'll find things that people really warm to are like McKinsey. They are like the Harvard Business Review. They are things that are, even Forbes, that are well researched. They'll trust that. People like to see what's going on in their market. They also like to see what's going overseas that they can grab and trying to find a best practice to see what's coming next down the pipe. So, if you're in London, you might want to look at see what's going on in the US, or you might want to see what's going over in China and Japan or whatever it is, right? So that's really powerful. We've seen people, when you're talking about chasing up, if you're chasing up deals, rather than talking about a deal, when you send this and actually show that you're interested in the client, they sometimes come back and give you the answer. More often than not, it's affirmative, but at least they give you the answer. And one of the worst things is not knowing, and nobody likes to chase. So actually being proactive is really, really, really good. It creates that kind of thing. And sometimes we find lawyers are reticent to do it. They go, well, my client will know this already. It's why should I send it to them? They've probably already seen it. But then the example I use is, my wife knows that I love West Ham and can't consume enough about my beloved Hammers. But if she sees there's a new sign-in or something's happened, she'll send me a text message with that. Now I've already seen it, but shows that she cares, and it makes me feel good because actually say, I thought about you. And it's the same feeling with your client. Even if you've already seen it, the fact that you're thinking about them and trying to help them releases that nice emotion in them. Very similar. So it doesn't matter if they've seen it or not already.
Exactly, it doesn't. And also, like you say, it shows that you care. But you can also offer your thoughts on that. Say, look, I think this is a really good signing for the club. No doubt, if you think they've already seen it, what do you think? And it engages a conversation as well. So I think it's a really smart way. So we're kind of whetting people's appetites. Hopefully lawyers are listening, thinking, okay, they've given me a bit of a kind of the base level. I'm kind of, okay, I'm at the point of, I'm going to do this. Time for a short break from the show. Are you looking for a way to get your firm working more efficiently and profitably while ensuring a better work-life balance for your team? Well, if you haven't considered our sponsor Clio, I'm here to strongly recommend that you do. I absolutely love working with Clio. Not only is it the world's leading legal practice management and legal client relationship management software, it also has a really solid core mission to transform the legal experience for all, something I personally support. What sets Clio apart for me is their dedication to customer success and support. There are lots of legal softwares out there, but I know from talking to Clio users that their support offering is miles ahead of the rest, with their 24/5 availability via email, in-app chat, and over the phone. Yes, you can actually call in and speak to someone. 𝐤𝐲 is also the G2 crowd leader in legal practice management in comparison to 130 legal practice management softwares, and has been for the last 14 consecutive quarters. G2 Crowd is the world's leading business solutions review website. You can check 𝐤𝐲's full list of features and pricing at www.𝐤𝐲.com/legally-speaking. That's www.clio.com/legally-speaking. Now back to the show. So let's go into the BD ladder, because you provide 6 core offerings to your clients. So BD and Marketing Director on Call, Partner Director BD and Marketing Practice Startup, Bid Tender Response, Business Development Growth Strategy, Brand Elevation and Personal Branding, and finally, Training and Coaching BD and Marketing Consultancy Service. There's a lot to go through there. So as concisely but as helpful as possible, would you mind just explaining a bit more about some of those areas so, again, lawyers get a bit of a feel for it?
Yeah, so look, the BD and Marketing Director on Call is kind of two things. We see, particularly in this region, we see firms that in the boutique area and kind of mid-tier that are growing, don't have access to that resource, sometimes have some marketing or office managers doing that role who need an extra guidance, an extra hand. So that's where I would come in and provide that support. So it's part of driving a firm strategy and building it, and also providing them with a confident someone they can, as a sounding board, to help them as they progress their career. With the idea that they're not dependent on us. We teach, educate, learn, show, tell, do, and then we can cut them free. Like the partner director startup thing is linked into our BD coaching, but we just found BD coaching is great, and that works across all levels with partners, particularly who are wanting to progress and do more in the business development field. But there's a real need in that kind of senior associates and those stepping up into partners to learn these skills and learn this quickly. And if we can get them before they become a partner and build that discipline and that habit and all those skills, it's not as scary and they're ready to do it. It's almost like in a lot of cases, people get given the top job and then said, oh, by the way, now you got to go and do some client development. It's too late. It's too hard, right? All the other things you mentioned there are really complementary around that. You know, the training and coaching we do to mixed groups, and that really helps drive it. But we will only do it in 2-hour sessions as a tops, because I fundamentally believe that if you give people too much, they do nothing. If you give them enough and make it interactive and get them to practice the skills, the majority of them, when they leave the training room, will actually use those skills. So I'm passionate about making sure that the dollars or pounds that are spent in the training room are not wasted. They actually get used. So we progress them over a longer period of time in shorter training sessions, knowing that actually there's value for money in what we're delivering and people are actually using it.
Yeah, no, and agreed. It all comes down to, price is what you pay, but value is what you get, right? So I think if people are getting that value, then, they're absolutely going to be happy. So maybe walk us through then, detail us through the process yourself working with a client. What does that look like? And how do you get back in touch with a client when the work has been completed?
Right. So for me, working with a client is really a fact-finding mission at first. What do they need? Where are they currently at? Where are they trying to get to? What are their particular hang-ups and what's holding them back? And they're unique to every individual. There's some common themes, but they are unique. And look, sometimes we'll have a session with the senior management team to understand where they want to go as a business, but there's always an element of one-to-one and trying to bring that kind of, what are their hurdles and barriers to getting this stuff? What's stopping them from posting on LinkedIn? What are they worried about? What do they think people are going to see? All those kind of issues that are happening out there. So we work through that. Invariably, and you touched on it, it's kind of a 2-part question there. Once we work with our clients, we find that they struggle to get back in touch with their clients once the work's done. So for us, maybe not so much because we're kind of used to that, but it's really around, you can sometimes be so focused on the matter in hand, the actual matter that you're doing the work, and it can be really stressful. It can be stressful on all sides. That you never dig deeper. You never ask the client what else they're working on. You never ask what else is going on for them. So we spend a lot of time actually talking around, well, what can you say in those interactions? What can you do to find out more? Because if you find out more, then you can actually get back in touch about the things that are important to them. You can check in, and then you can introduce them to people in your network. You can progress it further. Yes, it's important to do your client feedback, but who does your client feedback and why and what you're trying to get? But also, how do you get back in touch after client work is done? Well, simply a little bit like how we're talking about at the start, how you get in touch with someone, send them something of interest, send them things you think will light their fuse again, keep them going. Maybe suggest you introduce them to someone else in your client network, or bring them to a networking event that will have that cross-pollination going, because they're the things that clients really value, because they want to build their networks as much as you do. So if you can facilitate that, they'll always be in touch with you.
Yeah. And again, I love all this because it's all the things that I 100% agree with and have seen work over the years, because, yeah, we all know about network, net worth. But actually, also, when you're thinking of trying to get connected with people, think about, I always say, work warm. Who do you know who can introduce you to someone you don't know? Right. And that warm introduction, again, is a far greater way of going about things through leveraging who you've already got in your network to get closer to the pin.
Yeah, and that's a fascinating concept in itself, because people will tell you they get all their work from referrals, and then you'll dig a little bit deeper and say, so how do you actively manage those referrals? And they'll go, well, they just sort of happen ethereally. And you go, well, that's great, but how do you actually, when you need them, how do you work and mine those referrals? How do you ask the referrals? Oh, I couldn't ask. And well, there are ways you can ask. When the client's delighted you can say, who else should I meet? Who else can you introduce you to? But of course, the classic one, which works every time, is pretty much, really enjoyed working with you. Is there anyone that I can introduce you to? What type of people would you like me to refer you to? Now, the person may well ask, but we're engineered as human that if someone asks us and throws control in a conversation to us, we're most likely to say, well, let me have a think about that. But while I'm thinking about that, who would you like me to refer you to? But instantly, you get that back without having to ask. You've offered, they will offer back. It takes the awkwardness out of it, and lawyers don't like that awkward moment. Makes it much easier.
Yeah, it's reciprocal, isn't it? If you're leading with the value and the values of value, then people are going to respond back to that, and you're going to kind of build that relationship. And then it's also built on trust, isn't it? You're seen to be continually wanting to help rather than sort of taking from people. Okay, so we've really talked a lot about BD, marketing, sales, however you want to talk about it. What we haven't talked about, which is something again that maybe it's been over talked about, and everyone has different views on this, but I still believe it's important. It's the number one thing that I personally work on every day. It's my personal brand. So, what is the importance of a personal brand, and what advice would you give to those who are, particularly lawyers, who are looking to build a personal brand, where it be social media or in person or elsewhere?
Yeah, look, don't be shy. No one's asking you to be Kim Kardashian. Understand what it means in terms of personal branding over the way. I mean, if you can get those numbers, fantastic, well done. None of the rest of us can reach that. But first of all, know what your brand is. What do you want the people in the market and the sectors you work in and the target markets you want to operate in? What do you want them to know you for? Understand that first. When they think of you, they think that. How do they think you help them? Then start to pick the channels where they're most likely to respond to it. Now, for most lawyers in the commercial world, it's going to be LinkedIn, but you can use other channels as well. But that is the biggest B2B network in the world. The great news is you can control it and just be regular and understand what it is. Start small, post some articles of interest and share them. Write a little comment, this is good, what do others think? Build your connections in there. It's really important to have connections on a platform like that, because if someone leaves a company, you can still get in contact with them via message, whereas their email is gone as soon as they leave that organization. So it's really, really powerful. And dedicate time to it, and have a good discipline around it. If you're a busy lawyer and you've got lots of client work, no one's going to expect you to post 5 times a day. In fact, that's way too much. But maybe if you commit to posting 2 or 3 times a week, maybe even once a week if you're not doing it already, and then look to have a time, say in your lunch hour, where you look through the feed and look at where you should be contacting people or commenting. I mean, simple one, if someone congratulating them on a new job or a rise or whatever, just being part of that conversation. Simple early steps, but it's really, really important. And investing in your personal brand will stay with you for your whole career. And we think it's a new concept because of social media, but people were always doing it. They just used to do it on the speaking gig and by writing books and all that kind of stuff. They're still all part of the personal brand. It's not a new concept. It's just much easier to get for everyone to play in it now.
Yeah, and again, you make a really good point that something resonates with me that I always say. Your personal brand is your biggest asset, but it's also your greatest insurance policy. So, I could lose all my businesses tomorrow. All things could happen, but I'm not going to lose my personal brand, my network, and off the back of it, and would probably be far easier starting again off the back of having a personal brand and the trust and the reputation that you've built. And that's how, we've all been through pandemics, we've been through recessions, we've been through boom periods, we've been through, we're going through the AI revolutionary, jobs will be dispersed. So, how are you going to make sure you're top of mind and having conversations and standing out and potentially getting opportunities of people coming to you is through having a personal brand. So I think it's super important to labor that point.
Yeah, and look, AI, ChatGPT makes personal branding easier.
Yeah.
You can get it to do really good first drafts of what you want to post, but just be aware of its limitations. Know that it's a great junior copywriter, and know that it's a personal brand. So what you want it to do is give you that first draft when your caffeine hasn't kicked in and you're not sure what you want to type. As soon as you read it, and lawyers are good at writing, they'll look at that and go, "Oh, it's a bit cheesy. I don't like the emojis. I don't like this." Edit it, put it in your own voice. But actually, you've saved an awful lot of time by thinking about how you're going to structure that, what you're going to say. Use it as a really good editing and first drafting tool, but always make sure that you write it in your own words. One, it'll perform better because machines don't like machines, and everyone likes authentic and genuine voice. And two, that's what you should do. It's your personal brand. You want to put your opinion forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I always say it's not perfect brand, it's personal brand. So, sharing those lessons, those, all of those things that are authentic are actually going to do a lot better.
Yeah, look, and recently I interviewed a lawyer who does over here who's got a startup firm, and she's done a lot of work in social media because couldn't compete with the big firms and their branding, and actually used Instagram and all sorts of stuff. And the first admit it was scary, but it's that point you press go and press send. If it resonates with people, you've done well. And if it doesn't resonate with people, nobody sees it. Don't worry.
Yeah.
The worst thing you can do is having action through perfection. You've got to actually just get out there. Like anything,
Yeah.
the worst sales email is the one that isn't sent. The best sales emails are the ones that are sent that get some meetings back. So make sure you're active.
I'd rather have imperfect action over perfect inaction anytime, because you can always go somewhere with that. So let's talk finally a bit more about sort of BD ladder then, because how do you ensure that the advice and guidance offered through the BD ladder remains relevant and up to date? I mean, we've been talking about ChatGPT, which didn't exist a few years ago. How do you ensure it remains up to date in this rapidly changing business landscape?
Look, we follow the trends. We're members of the Marketing Association here and other things like that. So we keep on top of it. We, as we're doing personal branding, we read things and make sure we stay in there. We've got a network of other consultants we talk to. We speak to our clients. Look, we continually evolve. We've always run a personal branding training, as you saw on the website. Recently, we did our first one earlier this month. We're doing one next week. We're doing a personal branding in ChatGPT. So we're actually, in the second hour of the course, we get people to update their profiles, write posts, write long form posts, and they use ChatGPT. And actually, we then get them to schedule it so they can obviously review it the next day. But they come out of the session, their minds were blown at first, they're a little bit scared, but they've actually put the actions in place and they've used it. So we continually look at this stuff and see how can we bring that into what we do, how can we make it meaningful, and how can we take the fear away, and how can we show people so they can actually put it into practice. It's one of the courses that, when we ran it, and I ran it with Lucy, who's our marketing exec, you're not quite sure how it's going to go. You're putting yourself out of your own comfort zone because you've never done it before. Yes, we've tested, yes, we've rehearsed it, but until you get the audience and know what they're doing. But yeah, brilliant. And they loved it. So you've got to do that. Got to keep evolving and keep trying to move these things forward.
Exactly. Start and get better along the way. And I think, test, and you can always refine. So before we look to close then, Ben, what are your top 3 tips for those looking to start focusing on business development?
So the first one is to have and know your motivation for doing it. It's really important to have a motivation, a why, as Simon Sinek would say, right? Know why it is. Is it to progress your career? Is it because you just want to get the confidence up so you can speak to anyone and not feel inhibited about it. That's really, really important. The second one is to build that discipline and that time you will set aside to do it and to develop your skills on it. So you have to do two things if you're new to it. So doing those kind of both things, building that discipline and awareness. And then the third one is to really change your mindset to that of almost like a child, be curious. So rather than going there to inform and share your wonderful expertise with someone, actually think, what can I learn from this person? When we talk about how to have impact in meetings, we spend an awful lot of time telling and working with people saying the one thing you need to work on and practice and write down before any meeting is questions. It's irrelevant researching their website to a degree. Yes, you want to know what they do, but they know more about their business than you ever will. And what you'll learn from their website and their About Us section is pretty minimal. And most of it's probably out of date. So ask questions, be curious, dig deeper, find out more. The more questions you ask, the more rapport you'll build, and the more you'll learn, and the more you'll be able to tailor your offering when the time comes to what they actually need, as opposed to what you assume they need. So it's those three things, motivation, discipline, focus on a new skill, particularly around questioning and building rapport.
Yeah, I love that. I love the sort of curiosity gene, because I think it's so important. And I guess with that, if our listeners, which I'm sure they will, want to learn more about your career or the BD ladder, where can they find out more?
I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn. Name obviously Ben Paul. I think it's Ben Paul BDM is a LinkedIn tag. That's a good place. Or head to thebdladder.com. Really simple. We've got loads of insights and articles there. Raft of free ebooks where we have consultants and people from within the industry from all around the globe who write on certain topics, marketing, how to get best out of client meetings, and some pretty cool tools and guidebooks that people can download for free and just learn how to do BD. We're kind of nice like that. We like to share the message. So we're easy to find and we love to hear from people.
Fantastic. Well, we'll also share those links with this episode for you as well. But thank you so much, Ben. It's been a real pleasure having you on the show. Wishing you lots of continued success with your career, with the BD ladder and future ventures. But for now, from all of us on the show, over and out. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. If you like the content here, why not check out our world-leading content and collaboration hub, the Legally Speaking Club, over on Discord. Go to our website, www.legallyspeakingpodcast.com, for the link to join our community there. Over and out.